All right, good afternoon, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital. Thanks for your patience. This is the hybrid trading Q&A session for June 20th. We went with a 2 o'clock start. I had soccer practice this morning. We're doing our tryouts for the club. The season is tentatively starting up again, so we had to go through the figuring out how to play sports without violating social distancing requirements. We had a 10-foot uh, square grids to start working through our different drills and skills and start rebuilding the routine. Had three of my college players come back because they love the game and love the club and love the team, and are coming into work as assistant coaches and demonstrators for me. So it was awesome to see these young people embracing the moment. So I wanted to just share with you an email from Ken Hum. So if you were on the podcast yesterday, he pulled 30 execution R out of the market yesterday. And it was not an exceptionally large directional day. I mean, it was a directional day. But he pulled 30R out of it with Wheaton Precious Metals and using the TZA TNA pair tree. That's the triple leveraged Russell. So just using two standard frog champions, he was able to pull it out. And his markups were so good. And I covered him yesterday in the podcast. How he's managing those trades are just out of this world. So Dave, I sent you a note. Yeah, and thanks. Yeah, I am recording. So Dave, you had sent me a question, I think you this morning or last night, if I could go over the trade management of the supported spring crossing, winter crossing, and fall crossing. And what I'm going to suggest is I'm doing those every day in the daily podcast on the charts that folks are posting in the chat room. And so that, I believe, is the best way to answer that question, is to just say, plug into those. Those are the recordings of those are being posted excuse me, in Patreon, and then also as daily lessons in the LMS course number 104 has each of those daily recordings posted, so you have lots of access to them. And you can, once you pull that video up, you can kind of scale to it, or you can scroll through it pretty quickly to find out where it is. The gang of 7 interns are still eating their way through all of the daily podcasts for the last 4 months. So, but really, now that we're cranking, I would start with like 2 weeks ago when our course ended and start going through those nightly ones. And then if you have specific questions on how to manage those on a specific trade, I'll do that by commenting on the chart that you post, as opposed to individual generic rules. I mean, we're gonna try and get those, and we're gonna try to meet the other Dave's requirement or request for converting the strategy into a system. We're going to do that. We're going to make the supported spring crossing a standalone course for other folks that haven't had the background in hybrid trading and all the other ecosystem items. I believe that can be taught in 5 hours with practice, and then after a week of practice, you can master that setup. I just insist that that can be done. And so what I want to say secondarily then is that Ken Hum is crushing it. He is crushing it. That's the note that I sent him. Dear Ken, you are crushing it. Keep up the good work. Lock it in. So here's the piece of warning that I would give you. So I can remember another trader, still working with him, and he had worked his way out of the swamp, out of the mud, and had gotten a pretty good set of rules. And then I said, hey, it looks to me like you're crushing it. That the evidence of your histogram and your system quality number, that rolling 30, 60, and 90 trade system quality number, is showing remarkable improvement, and keep up the good work. And he took that as an opportunity to change his rules and add more risk and to try other things. And so I feel like I sabotaged him by not giving him cautious praise. So that's what I'm telling Ken Hum here is cautiously optimistic. Number one, you are crushing it. If you pull 30R out of the market in one day on 10 trades, you're locked. You are crushing it. So keep up the good work and lock it in, by which I mean eliminate leaks and inefficiencies, but don't change the architecture or geometry. The only number that he should change is the dollars at risk per trade. So don't change the geometry. Don't turn the position sizing risk into only 3 times the execution risk. Keep the 5-to-1 ratio, and then just change the number on the dollars at risk. That will cause your position size to increase, but it won't violate all of the hard-earned experience that you gained by trading in a standard, systematic, routine, business-like way. Be a machine. Be a brick-making machine, and then just increase. And if I could, what I would do is I would split each of you into 2. I would make your trader just trade the pattern without even knowing how much the asset allocator was putting on your trade, so that you could be free of that. All you have to do is execute the pattern correctly with discipline. And then let the asset allocator make a separate decision on how much to put on your trading as a function of your histogram. That's a mind split that if I could do that, I would do that. Figure out a way to do that conceptually in your own head. I do that in my own trading by simply having standard position sizes week to week, month to month, so that almost independent now of the size of the execution risk, I'm not using, or even changes in the frog box. I've just gotten to the point where I take the long-term frog box and decide how much I'm going to risk and what the position sizing is, so that I'm playing it at a poker table of standard size, and the chips are always the same chunks, and I just keep executing with standard bricks and standard chips. And that's the next evolution beyond the execution risk and position sizing risk. And at the risk of repeating myself, the reason I believe that is important, this probably represented the single biggest non-technical change in my psychology. And so I'm going to cover that lesson in a second, but let me finish up with my comment on Ken's email. So Ken's comments back to me was this little yellow brick road and this cycle of spiral learning. And what he's done is showing the levels of mastery not as a straight line set of stairs that you're crawling up, but a spiral around all of the elements that go into the full trader's experience, the mental, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, and that you start off unaware, and then you have to go through all of that unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious competence, that cycle of learning, and then weaseling your way around and around and around, seeing all sides of the mountain as you climb it, working your way up through knowledge, then comprehension, then apply. And then that really equates to those levels of mastery. And that's what it's like trying to walk a straight road in a crooked world. That world is shifting underneath your feet all the time. We're bodies in motion. I mean, the earth is spinning at the equator 1,000 miles an hour. and it's moving around the sun at some rate in the solar system. So we are bodies in motion. And what seems like a straight line is just how we interpret it. So I really love his diagram, and I'm going to shamelessly steal it. And his words back to me are, thanks for your encouragement, teachings, and corrections. Now, Ken and I have been working together for 10 years, and I think if you asked him, he would say that in the last 3 to 6 months, as a result of the hybrid trading approach and getting hands-on in the dojo and rolling around on the mat, that it's made all the difference in the world is by taking that student-centric, trading-centric approach to gathering the data from the actual trading and using that as opposed to trying to purify a precise language about trading. We're trading. So thanks for your encouragement, teachings, and corrections. And he's starting to understand the power of the process of training and doing and being in the moment and zero state. So craft knowledge. Those videos in the course on trading as a skill-based activity from Alex and Kim Anderson's insights about ruthless risk management, and the fact that it took 600 to 800 trades just to get it. I'll tell you that in everything I've ever done where skill mattered, it took thousands of reps. Whether that's learning how to do osotogari in judo, or the arm lock flow in jiu-jitsu, or pistol and rifle marksmanship, anything takes thousands of reps. Mastering these patterns takes thousands of reps until it's into your DNA, into your cellular level of knowledge. And when we looked at his charts yesterday, you could just feel the lack of waste. It felt effortless. It was wu wei, that state of effortless activity. Effortless action, wu wei. He says, yesterday's trades felt easy, like being pulled by the flow, carried downstream by the white water. Just steer and just watch out for rocks and branches. Trust your training. Don't overthink. Feel the wind in my face. Embrace the power of the current. Let the energy flow through you. At the end of the trip, feeling energized and back to the roundabout. Have some laughs, talked about what worked, what didn't, how to improve, and then into the dojo to train some more. Maybe the most important lesson we ever even did in the hybrid workshop was the mapping of the energy flows, turning it from a unfair tug of war up a hill pulling a fat guy with friction while you're on fire and being attacked by tigers and other carnivores and everything conspiring against you, into a cyclic natural process of the water cycle, from clouds to rain to refreshment to evaporation to snow that melts into streams, into rivers, into the ocean, and then evaporates back to the clouds. And then you learning to just let the river carry you. And then the process that we use to go from the left-hand side of all the beliefs that were in place that made it feel like it was a tug of war into the beliefs on the right-hand side, which were, what other beliefs do I have to have that allow me to just do exactly what Ken just demonstrated of how to trade in the flow? And then the all-important transitional beliefs that how do I transition with a push me, pull you approach, the carrot and stick, that allows me to transition from the old style direct action tug of war into a natural process in which I'm just part of the ecosystem doing my part to maintain the flow. I'm thinking of the monk Taquan's advice to the sword masters, who said that there's 55 things in your that matter for sword fighting, but if your mind focuses on just one of them, that's where it stops, and that's how you get cut. So he says that state of no mind, that natural process of being one with the opponent's sword, allows you to win before you even start. And that's what this sense of flow diagram is, combined with the yellow brick road. And that connects to the story we told before, that you think about Dorothy and the three amigos there starting their journey in Munchkin Land in these tiny little baby steps with a single brick, a single trade, until it led to the what they thought was the source of all answers in Emerald City and the Wizard. And it turns out that all of the knowledge was in the individual bricks along the way and in the journey and the traveling of their feet. And then the Good Witch reminds Dorothy that at the end that she always had the power to go back home. And Dorothy says, well, why didn't you just tell me that? And the Good Witch says conveniently, well, you wouldn't have believed me. And that's probably true, that it took making that journey and then seeing how the endpoints connect. That's the power of narrative and the moment of insight. When I was talking about that with my narrative inquiry guru, my boss, my mentor, Dr. David Bogiat, Van Miller and I, who are in that true storytelling and ensemble leadership workshop, I made that point in the flashcard with the Wizard of Oz that showed that as a blue arc, that the narrative arc that connects Emerald City in Oz all the way to the start of the Yellow Brick Road in Munchkin Land, is that arc is what ties it together and makes it come alive and closes the circuit. And Ken has shown that here nicely in this diagram. And it really is just picking them up and laying them down one step at a time. Take the next step, take the next trade, time, will, pattern, and money, and all of those things. And that your training and trading practice in the dojo is the same as the trade that you take in the market, or you're not training correctly. That's why my opinion is that if you trade 2 shares live, that's worth 1,000 trades of backtest that you don't have skin in the game on. You start with 2 live shares, and eventually you get to the point where the sniper's taking an exit on one of them and your manager's taking the exit on the other. So you don't even have to decide, well, should I be a sniper or should I be a manager? Yes, you should be both. And then see how those guys work together to give you better exits at 0 emotional and cognitive cost to you. Because instead of spending any energy on deciding which one to follow, you just follow both according to their own rules and take the difference. And then that psychic energy frees you up to go look at other trade frames that are developing and to manage other positions and to just relax and to execute effortlessly. That's the real beauty of that exit strategy. By not trying for the perfect one, you end up perfecting the trade-off decision. That's hugely important. Yesterday's trades felt easy, he says, like being pulled by the flow and carried downstream by the white water. That's a combination of being pushed and pulled by the force of the water, and 70% of your body's water anyway. So just steer. You don't have to do the work. Just do the work of steering. And then back to the dojo to train some more. What a beautiful diagram that is. Man, I am stealing that. He hasn't trademarked it, so yes, I can steal it with a clear conscience. That's all I need to be able to do. So now let me complete the thought about the dollars at risk idea. All right. So I have some pattern. I'm going to start this with just the SSC. So the SSC comes down the winter, and then it starts to hook. And so as soon as it does that, we're already drawing this line over here and saying, Because of the size of this harsh winter, from wherever that started from, that's leg one. And the best of all possible patterns is that collapsing dragon, which is going to be leg two. And so whatever the size of this move is, we're going to get another one of those if this all-important line right here breaks. That's the collapsing dragon. The harsher this winter, the better we like it. Now, while that price is going down, you have this big fat dragon that's also paralleling it. When that harsh winter is a long straight line, it's just directional with no noise either way, that dragon ends up stretching out. When this thing is not trending, when it's sideways, you'll see that dragon looking like this little sideways choppy crap, right? And you'll see the RL10 crossing like this, and you'll see some of this kind of sine wave looking stuff, right? And all that's happening inside a river, Crocodile River. And 60 to 70% of that time, you've got that kind of sideways chop. And you might even see that as a sideways quiet channel, because what happens is that price and the dragon and the RL10 and then the RL30 ends up looking like this. And all of that is happening inside that river, and there's the Bollinger Band mean inside that. That's what's going on inside there. Well, that whole sideways quiet channel is Crocodile River, and that's where you get chewed up. So what we really want to see are those magical moments when there's a breakdown. So when price breaks out of that river, and I'm showing the RL10 now as this red line. Let's just say it's red. What that really meant was that there was a series of, price actions, price bars that are coming down this way. And that RL10 leaves the river pretty quickly after that. And then the RL30 ends up leaving the river. And so when the RL30 leaves the river and starts tracking, you now have price, RL10, and the RL30 have all left the river. That slice in time is the beginning of the trend. Until all three of those are out of the river, it's all this choppy crap inside here. When you see a sideways quiet channel, that means everything is inside that river and just chunking along. And then it's price, then the RL10, then the RL30, then you have the beginning of trending behavior. We would love to see that become an unambiguous move down. That's at least one frog box. It has to be a move of at least one frog box intraday for that to be an unambiguous move. And that is by definition. We get to define that for our purposes. The frog box is equal to the difference between signal and noise. So if I look at one candle, and there's the high and there's the low, that where it opened, and this is a white candle, so it opened here, and then it closed here. This space in the middle of the real body is signal. And this region in the tail is noise. Why? Because it came down here and then it reversed. How do I interpret that? Noise. Same thing here. Noise. So if I take the signal and divide it by the range, I actually get the signal to noise ratio. So if I had a candle that had no tails, no wicks, in this case, it opened here, and that was also the low, and it closed here, and that was also the high. That is 100% signal. If I had a doji that opened here, went this high and that low, and then came back and closed right there so that the open and the close are identical, that is 100% noise. There's no real body. It's all noise. 100% noise is maximum uncertainty. I don't know whether it's going to break out above that or break out below that. I have no information about which direction it's going to go until it leaves the region of maximum uncertainty. So when we have a lot of downward price action, and then it starts settling down and ends up in the tightest little doji, we now have the perfect moment of uncertainty, because it's 100% uncertain about which way it's going to go, but the amount of information that it's going to cost me to see which way it's going to go is at the smallest. So that's why we love the doji. And if what preceded it was from a 10-day high or a 10-period high, maximum pain, and then range compression, we have my favorite pattern on the swings, max pain range compression. So I want the largest sell-off, max pain, divided by range compression, by the smallest doji, that gives me that max pain range compression. So that, by definition, is a critical state. As soon as it breaks out of there, it's starting to resolve the tension of that maximum uncertainty. So Alan asks, well, what about daily, weekly, monthly charts? You can obviously eyeball it, but just looking for clarity. Another way to express that on every time frame regression line fractal framework. So now in that same idea, but now I have something like the RL270, which is the long-term fair value. And there was a moment when the RL10, which is the perfect price, was co-equal with that. And then the traders moved at a distance, and then it reversed. This distance from fair value down to the point of maximum excursion is the potential reward. It could possibly go back to here. So if I can put a little risk box, I should have done that in red. So if I can put an MMRB on that, I can now start itemizing this as units of reward, units of risk and reward. I now have a risk-reward ratio. That's very similar to the signal-to-noise ratio. I have the minimum amount of noise and the maximum amount of risk. So when I look at those ratios on the RLFF page, I actually am getting a relative comparison of all the things in my herd. So if I have chosen my herd wisely, and I've populated it with different candidates that have differences in capitalization and market sector and where they are in the business life cycle, well then, I can rank those on the basis of some ratio of favorability and say maybe I use the RLFF range and say, that little set of guys right there, those are my 5 best reward to risk ratios as seen through the lens of RLFF. On an intraday basis, on 1-minute charts, I can set that up and just look at it in terms of frog boxes or hybrid frog boxes, or the MMRB that comes from the PSAR flip and the SSC. I can start using the SSC frame and pick the RL270 or the VWAP or the day as my target to the upside, and now by inspection I can figure out which ones offer me the best reward. It almost always turns out to be that the harsher the winter, the better the frame. It has to be that way. And why a harsh winter? Because fear is 3 times as powerful as greed. So the chances that the fearful move was the overreaction and overdid it is greater than the optimistic gain to the upside. So I always look for the max pain in every time frame. So there was some question, how do I define the unambiguous move? The one that you are absolutely convinced was a harsh winter. Now, here's the deal. I don't have to take any shortcuts on that. I don't trade until I have a reason to stop. I have to have a reason to trade. The trade's got to come to me with time, will, pattern, and money. All 4 of those things got to come to me. So I'm not going to accept any shortcomings on the pattern because there's so many opportunities. I can just wait and see. The harshest winter is what I want. That was so good. I got to save that one so that I come back, so I can remember how to say that again. So I'm trying to get back to this life cycle management now of the dollars, right? So everything started with that harsh winter. And because it was so harsh in a straight line, it caused that dragon to come down here. And the edge of the river, is probably over in here. I don't want to drop that fat. It is rare for the dragon to get out of the river, right? Just mathematically, it's hard for that to happen. So I just want you to remember there is a river up in here somewhere, and in the middle of that river, there's a Bollinger Band mean. So that river is coming down here. So just for clarity purposes, I just want to show at some point there's a Bollinger Band mean in here that matters a lot. Okay. And if this was a really harsh winter, remember that RL270 is going to be way up here somewhere because it departed a fair value that happened way back here. And this one is slow to adjust. Slow. So it was the size and the power of the traders to move it this way. That was the traders. And that's how much power they had to move it away from that long-term fair value. How much power do they had? They had as much power until they couldn't move it anymore. And then that's leg one. And why did it stop? Because that fell so far, it attracted buyers who came in and said, man, look at the price I can now buy this thing at. And that buying pressure comes in now, and it counteracts the selling pressure. And they already made their money on the short side. And so what ends up happening is that some local moment of change comes in where the trend is changing. So now the opportunity is going to be at least to get back the reversion to the mean trade and then the RL270. Those are not unreasonable targets to the upside. But now what I've got is the 3-period simple moving average of that RL10. That's the baby dragon. Oops. Baby dragon. SMA3 of RL10. RL10 equals price. That is the purely plotted price point, and all of the price on the bar data is noise. That little RL10 is the 10-period regression price point of the perfect price. That's why I tell you guys turn off the red and green candles, because they're distracting. That's making you look at the noise. When I turn it black, or even better, gray, then all I can see is the RL10. And it's very, very smooth. So when this thing is really trending, you'll see that the RL10 is straight and smooth. The baby dragon is smooth. The dragon is nice and smooth. And then because of math, you'll end up seeing something like the RL30. And remember, the RL30 is the health of trend. Like later on when we see the owl doesn't happen until the RL10 gets across the dragon, and then the dragon rolls up, and then the RL30 rolls up. So that's criteria 3, 4, and 5 of the owl. So criteria 1 was a harsh winter or an unambiguous move. Criteria 2 was the P1, which is another way of saying the regression line crossover outside of the river. The RLCO means that the RL10 crosses over the RL30 outside the river. So that's where the P1 happens. And that's criteria 2 of the owl. Criteria 3 is that thing is eventually going to turn and then cross, and that's criteria 3. When the RLCO happens, right? Well, down in here, we've got this baby dragon. That is the 3-period simple moving average of the 10. When that little critter happens, that's a warning. Aha, early warning that the winter is about ready to change to spring. And if you've got the TC2000 bundle or you've programmed it that way, you can actually turn that RL10 the color of the MACD, or you got to just look down to the MACD indicator to see what season you're in. That alone is a reason to get TC2000. Not the bundle, but just TC2000. So in the owl, the RLXD happens. That's criteria 3. Criteria 4 is the dragon rolls up. And criteria 5, the RL30 rolls up. So all of that happens in here. So the RLXD, I'm going to draw this as a green entry because that's where the SFC is going to enter if these other criteria have hit. And then the owl will probably hit somewhere in here. And then further up the stack, this RL30 or this RL10 is going to become a summer. And so somewhere around in here, there's going to be like an emerging dragon where it broke above some previous support or resistance level. So I've really got the SSC, the owl, and the emerging dragon. The owl is that middle one, so he's the wise guy. The SSC is really a way to front run the owl. The emerging dragon is the one, the owl actually front runs that. And the emerging dragon is the one that's like, dude, you waited this long for confirmation before you entered. All that did was reduce the amount of gain that was available to you here. Because that move off the bottom is only going to go as far as it's going to go. So when you enter with less certainty, more doubt, you're actually improving your gain on the move that's there. So now our job is to figure out how far down the stack we can go. So there is the turning point at the RL10. And remember, if that breaks, it's a collapsing dragon. But then the baby dragon now warns us that says, hey, this winter is about ready to become spring, and it's about ready to cross the dragon. So just be ready. And it's also going to tell you, finally, that the PSAR is going to flip. When all of this was happening, you probably had a PSAR that may have been, and I forget now which side of the dragon that thing might be on, but it's coming down here. And then when this crosses, actually, I want to say it's usually on the other side of the dragon. Well, just for clarity, I'm going to put it over here. So that PSAR is also tracking its way down. But at some point, when you get enough of this price change has occurred in this region, and it all occurred because of the buyers came in and are adding their pressure to the upside. it turns out that in that region of change, that transformation, maximum chaos, at some point, there's enough price improvement that the PSAR switches from here down to the other side. And now I have my sight picture. In rifle marksmanship, we call that the sight picture. Is everything aligned? Is my rifle pointing at the target? So I got to see three things for the SSC. One, I got to see a harsh winter. Two, I have to see winter has become spring. Three, I have to see RLXD. And four, I have to see PSAR flip. Now, we have since learned that these things, the RLXD and the PSAR, the sequence, it may not always be the same. It doesn't matter. As long as at the moment of entry in here, all of those things have happened. I've seen the harsh winter. Winter became spring, 2. The RLXD has occurred, 3, and the PSAR has flipped, that's 4. Now I can take the entry, and now my stop, my unit of risk, my minimal manageable risk box is that red box. And now my potential target is really the Bollinger Band mean, because this was simply the harsh winter created the opportunity for a reversion to the mean trade. And in the time that it took for these other conditions to occur, the Bollinger Band mean moved down this far. So we didn't give back that much. And now we can say, well, here's probably a unit of risk, 2, 3. Now I'm at the far side of the river, maybe 4, and maybe 5. That might be one frog box. That's at least going to be one position sizing our risk. Why? Because this minimum manageable risk box, we set that equal to 0.2 position sizing risk. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each time it goes up that stack, I'm locking in 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. By the time I get to the far side of the river, I've got a 0.6 win according to position sizing risk. That's good. So if this thing gets that far and starts to fail, I use the 2R battle drill, which is simply a frame of mind. My sniper comes in and nails that, bang, and I get paid. This will look like a dog's breakfast by the time you try to, what else is he in there? I want to just go back and really lock in this important mind split. Back on this side, if I just think of the position sizing risk, maybe I have some pattern that said, because of the pattern, here's the price, here's the adverse price that tells me I was wrong. And let's say that we were just using a doji for that. And if that doji was 10 cents and I was risking $400, if I just divided that into 400, I could have 4,000 shares. But what if the same pattern happened And now that little doji, for whatever reasons, was 40 cents, just because. That means on the same pattern, the same trade, I could have 1,000 shares in that trade. My personal experience is that when I'm trading the same symbol, maybe I'm trading EWZ Brazil. If I've got 4,000 shares in that position versus 1,000 shares in that position, that feels like two completely different frames to me. Two different trades. Like, I don't see those as really just two identical examples of the same trade. No, there is this whole category of trades where I'm risking and I got 4,000 shares and I got 1,000. Those don't really compute to a single box for analysis. So what I want to do is something like, if I use a frog box as my position sizing risk, and I say, if the frog box was 50 cents and I was risking 400 shares, that means I could, or 400 bucks, I could have 800 shares. Now, if the doji was 10 cents, then I've got 800 shares. And if it moved against me, I entered here and then it moved against me 10 cents and I take my exit because that told me that I should now be short. All I lost was 10 cents on 800 shares. I lost 80 cents. Or $80, excuse me. Whereas on this trade, if my doji was 40 cents and it moved against me 40 cents, well, then I still only had a 40-cent loss on 800 shares. Whereas on this one, I had a 10-cent loss on 4,000 shares. I actually now love to trade with more uncertainty, and I'm going to be wrong more often. Well, if I'm wrong more often because I only have a 10-cent buffer, I don't want to be wrong more often on 4,000 shares compared to 1,000 shares. I'm setting myself up for emotional disaster. All I want to do is trade with a standard chip size. And then if I don't get cards, I muck the hand, and sometimes it takes off and I get a big reward. So by separating out position sizing risk from execution risk, you really reduce the psychological distress. And that's what erodes your will. And that's what makes you want to be right on every trade. It makes you question your rules all the time because you're trying to trade with a maximum position size allowed by math, as opposed to trading with a execution risk and standard bet size. If you just take the formula of position sizing risk to drive your share size, you're setting yourself up for maximum stress allowed by math. So I would rather just trade with the standard. I'd rather go to the poker table and plan to trade 10,000 trades with standard chips in the same way every time. That's how I minimize. When you watch World Series of Poker and you watch the pros, they are the opposite of stressed out. So now there was a question of, and I'm talking strictly intraday because this is the one where it makes the most difference. There was a question which said, do you care if the Bollinger Band mean is not 1-to-1 to your MMRB? No, I don't care about that at all. Menu, new, don't save. And here's why. Here's what the frog statistics tell us in the range stat. So here's the open, right? And when that thing opens right here, I know that what is available, the maximum reasonable intraday move in either direction is one range stat, R stat. From the open, there can be, boy, was that the ugliest looking box you ever saw. That's what I should have done the first time. There's a range stat move available in either direction. You could see a range stat move up or a range stat move down. Those are the limits of the professional maximum reasonable intraday move, right from the open. So if it opens here, and now I'm going to make that red like that's like this is the middle of the river. So now I've got this river in here. And now price makes this breakout into this harsh winter and starts to reverse. Well, eventually that Bollinger Band mean is going to come down, and it's slow, because the river's coming down. And I've got some tight little minimum manageable risk box in here because of the SSC, let's say, because the PSAR moved down and then it flipped and it's starting to move up. So there's my trade frame. I ended up buying it right there because of all the other reasons. If this was the low of the day, and I'm going to draw this in this solid, if that was the low of the day, the upward move that's available from the low of the day up is one range stat. Conveniently drawn right here. And so my 2-to-1 is measured against a range stat move. So this little Bollinger Band mean might come down in here. And so I might not even see a full 2-to-1 to the Bollinger Band mean. That's about 1.5. But in fact, this is not even drawn to scale because a range stat is typically 4 frog boxes. I'm going to draw this over here, not to scale. So the way that the frog box and the range stat are computed, it's equal to the average range plus 1 standard deviation. And I know I've covered this before, but you really can't hear it too many times. So on a typical, when there's a frog quality number of 3, that means that the range stat is 4 frog boxes. So I want you to think about the power of the hybrid frog now and this minimum manageable risk box. It is not unusual that it's not unusual for your little MMRB to be a quarter or a half of a frog, or in this case, about a third. So when your little MMRB is down here, I want you to realize what that means. Is if that thing if you had that really harsh winter and it sold off that far and started to reverse, and you got some little MMRB in here that was, a third of a frog box, that means that there's another one here and another one here, and there's 3 inside this frog box, and 3 inside that frog box, and 3 inside this frog box before it ever even gets to that maximum reasonable intraday move, which was you find the low and then you add the range stat to it. That tells you what the upper limit of a reasonable move for the day is. So when you shrink the size of your MMRB, you are maximizing the opportunity to get most of that kind of a move. And so when I do my 2-to-1, reward to risk ratio, as long as I can see, here's 1 and here's 2, I'm well within the upper boundary of the range stat move. So my 2-to-1 is already baked into the cake with those 2 units of risk, and I'm really only execution risking that much. So I'm not trying to look for how far is the move to the Bollinger Band mean to qualify it for 2-to-1. When I'm intraday and I know the size of my range stat box and I can see where my trade location is inside that range of reasonable moves for the day, my 2-to-1 intraday stuff is more than taken care of. And my job is to try to reduce the size of this MMRB and try to shave it down as tightly as I can. And that's what the SSC does. The SSC is an effort to get a smaller entry of uncertainty compared to the OWL. Well, why is that? Because as I start looking up the stack, and if my SSC entry is here, and the OWL is here, and the emerging dragon is there, so there's the OWL and there's the SSC entry, and that was all off of we made some kind of turning point here. The risk box for the SSC is from the open down to where that PSAR flip is, right? That PSAR flip, which was equal to where the maximum excursion of the RL10 happened. Well, when I'm drawing the risk box for the OWL, it's to the same point. Because it's not until I see this price down here violated that the upside move is no longer the case, and now it's the downside move. So this is the key price level right here. And all I've done with the SSC is reduce the amount of certainty or confirmation I have before I just get in right here, or here at the OWL, or there at the ED. All I've done there is theoretically, I've said, oh, I've seen a stronger and stronger move. So there really is evidence of additional buying pressure coming in. But all that does is it starts cutting away at some of these potential gains that I'm getting, and I'm missing the easier parts of the move. By waiting for more confirmation, I'm actually missing out on the easier money. So the question from Richard was, so the red box I drew on the left is the distance from the bottom of the RL10 to the other side of the dragon? Yeah, because the risk box is from the point of entry in the SSC down to the PSAR dot. And the PSAR dot is really, it's mathematically at the same level where the RL10 reversed. If you go over here and look at when the PSAR flips, where that PSAR is drawn, oops. Apparently there's a smart button on my pen. Yeah. So where you look for where that PSAR is drawn, it's drawn at the same place where the RL10 reverses. So it's that same line in the sand. When that thing cracks, it's a collapsing dragon. So now what I'm doing really is I'm deciding how far up it has to go. Well, there's my risk box if it's the SSC. There's my risk box if it's the owl. There's my risk box if it's the emerging dragon. But they're all drawn off the same price that invalidates them. And you just got to decide what level, where are you going to make that entry? How much uncertainty can you enter with? Here's my experience, the sooner that you enter, the more uncertain you feel about it. That's good, because then you don't even try to stick around. The longer you wait to go up the stack before you enter, it's probably because you wanted to feel more confident about the trade, which means that as it starts failing, you're dealing with, oh, I still have room to go. I can let it fall further and let it fall further. So you end up giving back more because you were invested psychologically in the confidence of it going up the stack. I don't want any of that. I don't have any confidence in this trade at all. So I would just as soon get in on the smallest box, where if it does go against me, I can get out without taking more than a 1 execution R risk. If it moves 10 cents against me and I get out, I love it. Because if it moves 20 cents in my favor, I can get to no lose plus dinner for 2. And now only a 20-cent move gets my risk out of the trade. That is so important to your psychology, to be able to trade without fear and without emotion and without commitment to the trade. Ashok asked me that earlier this week. He says, man, I start the trade with so much confidence, but then as soon as it starts going against me, I start losing confidence, and then I go from 5 minutes to 1 minute, and then I execute on there. Well, I want you to take the opposite side of that. I want you to have no confidence in this trade, so that when it does move against you and it hits your execution, you're out. Because you want to get the other trade anyway. You want the collapsing dragon. You have got to master that single central idea, and then you will see why setting that equal to a 0.2 loss is brilliant, because you won't sweat that. It's only a 0.2 loss, and now you're into a collapsing dragon. Put it this way. Would you be willing to pay 0.2 of an R to be convinced that you got the best pattern in the world, the collapsing dragon? Yes, you would. Why? Because that's going to give you a 2 full position sizing R. You wouldn't mind giving a 0.2 for that. That's all you're doing with the SSC venture is, oh, it failed, I give up 0.2 and I'm in the collapsing dragon. But sometimes it doesn't fail. Sometimes it starts going up that stack, and now you can get to no lose plus dinner for 2, and now you're going to get paid. Dude, that is the idea I'm trying to get into your head. Then by separating out execution risk from position sizing risk, you don't get into that trap of trying to maximize your position size. You trade with a standard position size off. Use the frog box, for crying out loud. Use whatever the frog box is, let that be 1 position sizing R, and you want to try to get your MMRB down to a 0.2 of that. That's a nice way. Or you could just say, whatever the box is, I'm not even going to screw with the frog. I'm just going to take whatever my position sizing is, says that's 0.2, and then my position sizing is 5 times that for computing R multiples. That is absolutely massively important. Master that idea this week, and then go do the SSC kata. I'm going to shift gears. I need to answer the specific questions that you guys asked. Go back to the nightly podcast Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night, and listen to the dozen case studies each night of marking up how to manage it specifically. And then just be amazed at Ken's 30-yard traits on Friday. You can see him getting it each night by doing the kata. God, is that hard? That is huge. That is so freaking important. Good gosh. What is the kata, you ask? Good question. Now, here's why the kata matters. I'm going to go through this. What's the kata? It's pretty straightforward. But the kata is connected to this summary of, Eugene asked a question about high reliability organizations. Here's the deal on high reliability organizations. Why don't complex organizations fail? So, why do they succeed when 90% of businesses fail? You got to understand that about human nature. I teach business entrepreneurship and I teach business process consultants how to do this. And the very first thing that we learn, and it's reinforced for the last million years, 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. And it's not because they weren't passionate and following their dream and all that bullshit. Pardon my language. It's because it's hard. And passion isn't enough for sustainable business operations. Because if you actually start succeeding, other people are going to model you and come try to eat your lunch. It's a jungle. So 90% of businesses fail within 5 years. And then in the next 5 years, another 90% of them fail. Because it's hard. Well, if a hamburger shop fails because life is so hard, how come things like nuclear reactors, aircraft carriers, and firefighters and their whole firefighting squad, those things are infinitely more complex than making hamburgers, but they don't fail? Why is that? It turns out that when you study that for 30 years, people find, there's 5 reasons why they don't fail. High reliability organizations are extremely complex and mission critical areas where the consequences of failure are catastrophic. And so in order to account for that increased risk and the consequences of failure, they have all sort of universally discovered that these 5 elements contribute to their success, all out of proportion and probability to what the rest of human experience is like. This is what distinguishes them. They are preoccupied with failure. They don't even care about the successes. They just don't want to blow up. And the successes will take care of themselves. There's plenty of reasons why they should work and could fail, but there's so many things that can go wrong that they don't pretend that the plan could ever even be perfect. All they're doing is looking for areas where the plan might fall apart and then investigate where it could be falling apart. So if it starts to fail, they can get on it. And then they protect that with multiple layers of protection And then they reward guys who report on their own failures so that we are not inhibited by our ego or secrecy or worried about a bonus and contribute to lying. So they are preoccupied with failure. They are reluctant to simplify interpretations. They don't oversimplify. If it's complex, it's complex, and they figure it out. So they are committed to a realistic view of the world and not an overly simplistic view. Although keep it simple, stupid is a good general principle, high reliability organizations do not oversimplify. Einstein is famously misquoted as saying something like, you should strive to make the world as simple as possible, but not simpler. So, a reluctance to simplify interpretations. Sensitivity to operations, that the ongoing performance of the tasks is the most important source of new data to determine if we're still on glide path or if there's some important variable in the world that changed, or if a variable has now joined the environment. So there's a new variable never before seen, or one of the other variables left. So the sensitivity to operations is more important than a commitment to doctrine. Although doctrine's important, it's not more important than what's actually happening. So somebody asked me, well, what's the perfect system definition? Frame your trade and trade your frame and get better at that. And the system definition will improve on the basis of how you have learned. That's what Ken Hum just showed you with a 30-hour day on Friday. Sensitivity to operations. Commitment to resilience. You lose resilience when you thought it was going to work and it didn't. So don't think it's going to work, think it's going to fail. And then if it does work, you get an emotional bank account debit or credit, or whichever one. It adds to your bank account. Stupid accountants. So you look at positively adding to your resilience and increasing that as opposed to hoping that you don't lose it. You can increase resilience. I am preparing a course on how to increase your emotional resilience, taught by a world-class positive psychologist, and I've become licensed in his teachings. And so I'm putting together a application for our trading environment and adapting his teachings to the trading environment. And I'll be offering that as part of a leadership course. Positive psychology, emotional resilience, self-confidence, some of that. So the commitment to resilience says each decision you make comes with the potential for some cognitive cost. So learn how to become resilient by managing your chimpanzee, by developing a rhino skin, by understanding that it's going to be hot in the kitchen and you need to build up calluses in your hand if you're working with your hands. So just recognize that's part of it. And that's actually an edge. Because if you can take it and they can't, you can hang in there longer. Deference to expertise. And that is that whatever is the specific rule, it trumps the general principle. And expertise comes from evidence and analysis and reflection and trial and error and continuous learning. Well, those are the principles of high reliability organizations. I've uploaded this chart and then a one-page paper that says what I just said, but in better words, along with the definitive reference from Professor Wyke and Sutcliffe from University of Michigan, who are the leading scholars in that area for the last 40 years. Well, what all of these things lead us to is this notion that, number one, you've got to have good rules. Get my pen going here. You have to have good rules. and then you have to strive for flawless execution of those rules. Those two things are separate. And the secret to that is to get your ego out of it. If that is your ego, this has got to be an ego-free zone. Just don't care about being wrong. I expect to be wrong. So here's the way we work the kata. The kata is a set of good enough rules. It doesn't even matter if the rules are good. All you got to do in the kata is say, given a set of rules, can you follow them flawlessly? If so, you've solved the second problem, which is flawless execution. It's a separate function to get good rules. Once I have good enough rules and flawless enough execution, the next one is asset allocation decision. Based on the evidence of near flawless execution of a good enough set of rules with enough statistically significant samples, what is the right percentage of risk that is justified in putting on that next trade or that in that system? Well, all of those things are subject to improvement because we're going to get better, because we can't be perfect. So what we're going to do is use the principles of high reliability organizations to use those 5 insights to protect us against the ego, which is trying to kill us because you think you're right, because you have some evidence. So I can stop thinking now and just do that, and surprise, it doesn't work. But I believe I was right. That belief is useless. It's worse than useless. So we're going to be guided by the principles of Kaizen in the workplace, Kaizen in the Gemba, which is continuous improvement, and the principles of Shingo, process improvement. That's all of these little incremental quality circle improvements, all of these nudges. That environment allows you to create a HRO in your own trading practice. That's your edge. You know how many people really want to do that? Nobody wants to do that. You know why? Because it's hard. That's why it works. That's your edge. That's where your thick skin comes from. That's where your emotional resilience comes from. That's the knowledge of the craftsman in his head, heart, gut, hands, and feet, that he can keep doing it every day when the other guy can't or won't invest in all the things that it takes to be excellent. Be professional. Do your job. So what's the kata that you're going to flawlessly execute? Those are the rules. To pass the SSC challenge, you must demonstrate the following kata. And then when I say demonstrate, that means you got to do it. I'm not going to give you a quiz that say, can you identify the 20 elements of the kata? No, I don't care if you can say it. I only care if you can do it. Trade DIA and EWZ only on 1-minute charts. Set up your indicators with the correct parameters, the correct site picture. Indicate on your chart with a green circle where you enter. Mark up your initial risk with a yellow box, not an orange box, a yellow box. Why? Because that's the kata. Use the PSAR as a trailing stop until it hits the Bollinger Band, till the PSAR hits the Bollinger Band mean. Then use the Bollinger Band mean so that you learn the difference. I'm giving you one option. If you have 2 execution R in hand, you could elect to take a sniper exit because that's such an important skill. I'll let you do it. Mark your exits with a red dot. Identify the maximum favorable excursion with a pale blue box. Mark the actual realized gains and losses with a pale green or red box, respectively. Draw a black box around the trade and then number them. Then compute the R capture for each trade, and then compute the R capture net for the whole series on that chart, a bottom line ticket summary for that series. Then do an after action review of your trades and identify things to sustain, improve, and then to act on that you commit for planning, preparing, executing, assessing. Make a brief summary comment in your learning journal of aha moments, reflective learning, commitment to action. So I'm asking you to perform the assessment and document it. And then include a summary of that insights from 16 and 17. Just put a summary of what you learned and are carrying forward as a result of doing the assessment on your chart markup, so we can see evidence that you're doing the assessment and that you're learning the right lessons. Then do those steps 1 through 18 error-free 5 days in a row, and post that chart 5 days in a row in the SSC kata room. Then perform an owl meditation for gratitude and forgiveness. Then you have passed the kata. Then you should start trading it with 2 shares live going forward, or whenever you're ready. But if you can perform the kata, you're ready to trade it live forward with 2 shares. And if that feels too risky, for crying out loud, just do it and count how many dollars you actually lost, and then send me a receipt, and I'll give you a gift certificate for 10 times that, up to $100. So there's no risk. When you're trading live forward, there is no risk to you. It's already a 10R trade. Now, if you lose $10 and you send me a request for a $100 coupon, I'm happy to send it to you. But that'll say something about you and me, that I'm making a facetious case. It's not even a facetious. But if that's a genuine concern about, well, I'm not ready to trade forward because of the risk to real dollars, I'll give you 10-to-1 up to $100 as a coupon for future services and coaching. Ashok said, hey, how do you improve patience? Well, here's how I think. You improve patience by sitting quietly and doing nothing until it's time to act, and then you act. That's how you increase patience. It's a muscle. You try it. You try to be patient, and you learn from that about how patient you can be, and then you watch to see, what is it that caused me to act, and I decided to act. Or are you going to tell me that you acted against your own will? I will say bullshit. And he said, well, how do I improve my confidence? Well, I don't say improve your confidence. I say eliminate your confidence. Replace it with a commitment to perform the kata with intention. After you master the kata, you will then figure out with evidence what the right level of risk that you can trade that at. You'll have evidence to demonstrate you can manage the monkey. And that's where your confidence will come from. Don't be confident in the pattern. Be confident in the evidence and your performance. There's a difference. So he then asked me, where can I get more psychological lessons? Well, after you complete the kata, then you should take the psychological lessons I prepared for you in the psychology course. I prepared for you the psychological course number 102 and 103 in the hybrid trading in the LMS. Master the kata first, then those psychological lessons are worthwhile. Until you've done the kata, there's no point in even doing the psychological lessons because you don't have the commitment. You haven't demonstrated a commitment to learn anything yet. And so the psychology won't help you if you won't do the kata. But if you do the kata, you may not even need the psychology lessons. Guess what the kata is? It's the psychology lesson. Now, listen to the sound of these sentences and statements. I am not confident in the pattern when I trade it. I am confident that I will follow those rules exactly, and I'm confident that I will include the results in the histogram of the pattern's performance, and I'm confident that I can assign a proper level of risk capital to the trading of that pattern based on evidence. That's where you put the confidence. You don't have any confidence the pattern will work this time. You get no way of knowing that. Why would you have confidence in your ability to predict? You think the pattern is predicting a successful performance? It is not. It's saying that this thing pays off enough times that if you execute it flawlessly, over the long run, you're going to make money. That's what it says. It says nothing about this time it's going to work. If you play poker properly, in the long run, you will win against other humans because they're stupid. They refuse to learn. They might be ignorant. That just means they don't know. But ignorant people can learn, and then they're no longer ignorant. A stupid person is one who won't learn or can't learn. And it's too bad. Now, my fireman is stronger, smarter, and braver than the chimp. So the fireman is my hero. He's going to get me out of risk and get me to no lose plus dinner for two. And when he does, he takes the chimp with him to give him a banana for getting me into a trade that the fireman could save me from. The chimp gets you into the trade because he sees the bananas and then he says, oh crap, we're all gonna die. And he calls the fireman, and the fireman gets us out of that danger and then takes the chimp back and gives him his banana for getting us into a trade. And now it's a science project. Now my sniper and manager take over the exit management, and they exit the trade when the time is right. The accountant scores the trade, and the caretaker, aka Doc, comforts the manager and sniper and prepares them so that they can manage the next trade. That's the team that it takes to manage the trade psychologically. Charles says, this could not have arrived at a better time. The template works perfectly with the ones I'm using in my current experiment. He's trading for a hedge fund. The HRO expects us to perform less than flawlessly. It expects our rules to be less than perfect. It expects us to make bad risk management decisions sometimes with our feelings. So the HRO principles keep us from over-optimism of our better nature. So there are 4 separate but related issues for us to work on. Have good or good enough rules. I've given you good enough rules. Flawlessly execute those rules. I've given you the requirements of the kata for you to demonstrate that you can perform to a set of rules flawlessly. You can do those things flawlessly. Then we can work on assigning the confidence level to the rules for risk capital. How much should I risk on the trade? Start off with 2 shares and then increment. And then by organizing our activities with the 5 principles of HRO, we will protect ourselves. There are 4 distinct judgments. The 4th one, the HRO principles, keep you in the game. So our performance at any given time is the worst of those 3. Like if I can execute flawlessly and assign good but my rules are bad, my performance is not going to be very good. It takes 1 times 2 times 3, or A times B times C, to achieve the results, but then the HRO, judgment 4, keeps us in the game. That's what I want to say about that. All right. I'm going to do a speed run on the questions and answers from this week in order to get through this. But you should listen to those nightly podcasts from this week. They are excellent and reinforce those lessons. So these answers are in writing now. I've moved them from out of the comment section up here and answered them in writing. Okay. I also put the link for last week's Q&A session, which I also thought was very good, which answered and I put their answers in writing up there, but the explanations were pretty good. And after I process this one, I will post the link to this session right underneath this. So Alan says, I'm having success implementing spring crossings and winter crossings in collapsing dragons. Remember that statement. But what I'm finding is that after the unambiguous move, I can catch the move and the extension or the reversal pretty well. But then I find myself in what is a sideways quiet channel, and I end up taking a lot of losses because of range trading. I answered that question at the start of this when I talked about stay out of the river. Stay out of the river. 60 to 70% of the time it's in the river. Stay out of the river. Take two trades, the SSC and the SWC and the CDs, chain them for a couple times, or keep trading them until you scratch two in a row. Just because you had two winning trades doesn't mean you stay longer. No. Each trade is its own trade. When you have to scratch two in a row, stop, breathe, relax, reset, zero state, get ready. Don't trade the SQC. Wait for it to compress to the Z3 pinch, where now the Z3 lines have pinched inside that little frog box. Now the breakout is tradable, and the whole cycle starts all over again. Or just wait to see the unambiguous move and then trade the SSC or the SWC. Stop staying with it. Is there a rule of thumb to determine when a trade has left the critical state? Well, at first I thought you were asking, well, if it's in a critical state at the doji, yeah, 5 cents above or below is when it left the critical state. But what you're really asking is, there is really some region in here, like where the turning point is and the SSC happens in here. That whole region is the critical state. When is it now back to normal sideways choppy crap that I should stop trading? That's actually the same question you just asked up top. Wait to demand to see the unambiguous critical state. Make the trade come to you. Don't try to find excuses and shortcuts so you can just keep trading. No, be judicious. You only got 4 bullets. Make sure you've got a target, time, will, pattern, and money. When your exit is hit, that's when that trade is over. And no indicator can tell you when future moves aren't coming, so don't believe in any trade when you take it. Let time, will, pattern, and money be the reasons you decide to take the trade. So if there's any question in your mind that that's not a critical state, it's not a critical state. It should be a slam dunk. It's, oh yeah, compel me to trade. Jason asked, where are the links to the pod? So I'm going to keep up. I have to update those links every month anyway, and I will post them in the message board of this project. Eugene says, can you give me a background in HRO design? In the files section, you will see a one-page info paper that I use to teach HRO with a reference, and that should give you enough, plus this discussion that I just gave you. And then as you look at some of the things that I talk about for risk management in zero state and not believing in the trade, all of these are manifestations of HRO. But I will probably do another mini lesson course on that to show how each of those 5 principles are reflected in the strategies and systems. He says, hey, purple dots for sniper exits, that's what I demonstrated on Friday. Hey, I'll tell you what, The Friday night podcast, the discussion of the different ways to manage the trades, is gold. That was gold. And in that, I use purple dots and purple lines for price targets. And the reason is, I'm an Asian history scholar. Purple was the Chinese emperor's reserved color. Only the emperor could use the vermilion ink. And when you would get an official written edict from the emperor, it would be signed in purple ink, and there would be this statement on there. It would tell you, do the following things, blah, 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 and then it would say, read and tremblingly obey. What a line, in purple ink. So I recommend the use of those purple dots for sniper shots in your markups when you're doing your kata. And you'll see plenty of evidence of that from Friday. His big aha was, following the kata rules is proof to himself, says Eugene, that he can understand any rules, regardless of how I feel. That you can follow rules, even if you don't like them, or even don't understand them, or even if you're the one that wrote them on your best behavior in your mind, and then you're trying to execute them in practice. If you can perform the kata, you can perform any rules because you will have separated your ego from the rules. It's like my wife and neighbor trade the frog really well, because if the rules work, then they're excellent traders and they get to keep the money. If the rules don't work, I'm the idiot for giving them bad rules. So their ego is completely out of it. That's why I say, if I could, I would impose that mind split on you. So kata makes us see the separation between rules and your own execution proficiency, and strips out the ego. Just follow the rules. Now, the rules are either good or bad based on the evidence of flawless execution of performance. But the rules are not inherently, they say nothing about you. They are outside of your ego. Unless you persist in following bad rules and you insist they're good in spite of evidence, well, then that's just a mistake. His final question, now that he's mastered the SSC kata, can he take the shorts as well? He's really saying, can he go to the sideway or to the supported winter and fall crossing? Yes, you can. Chi Weng Chong says, hey, when the RL10 is whipsawing up and down along the dragon and creating multiples of SSCs, SFCs, SWCs in very tight moves, should we trade them? Or should we wait for unambiguous moves, like moving out of the front? Yes. Should we only take those with the minimum reward risk of 2? Yes. Wait for unambiguous moves. Demand unambiguous moves before you even trade. Why? Because it's your money. You only got 4 bullets. Don't waste them on what you thought might have been a rabbit. My dad used to give me 4 bullets and a .22 rifle and said, bring home 2 rabbits. We're going to eat them and sell the skins to buy more ammo. If I didn't bring home 2 rabbits, we either went hungry or we didn't get ammo. And then now I got to catch rabbits by hand? Ugh. Don't waste ammo. Unambiguous moves. Listen and re-listen to that discussion of why the range stat just guarantees that we have a 2-to-1 for position sizing. Don't worry about it. Trade the pattern. There's nothing in the sight picture that says, oh, and there has to be a 2-to-1 reward to risk to the. I don't say that. There are 4 criteria for the SSC. Harsh winter, winter becomes spring, RL10 crosses the dragon, PSAR has flipped, buy it. There's nothing in there about 2-to-1 and Bollinger Band mean all that. No, it's already baked into the cake. There are so many opportunities every day. Make the trade come to you. No shortcuts. So we're 2 hours into it. Well done. I will get the recording going at 8 o'clock tonight. I'm going to read and review the weekend trading report to come up with some ideas. from that, you can put together your trade frames for Monday, post 2 good ones in the chat room, but not EWZ and DIA. I'm going to post my trade frames for those 2, along with US Steel. So you can go ahead and mark them up. Just don't waste your 2 charts on those 2, because I'm going to show you what my trade frame looks like. But if you just want to do it, go ahead. Just go ahead. Hey, Ken, I want to post more than 2? Post more than 2. But I'm going to at least comment on 2 of them. But if there were 200, I may not get to all of them. So that's what. So tonight is reading of the reports. Sunday night is reviewing of trade frames. Monday is just back to work. So thanks a lot, guys. Well done. We'll get this posted and published. I'll post the link in here. This is where you keep adding your questions on site. Hey, if you want to send me a question by email, send it to me by email. That's fine. But post it in here also, so other people can see your good questions. And then that's awesome. If I send you an answer by email, do me a solid, take that and post it in here as an answer. Learn how to use the right board. But that's if you want to try it. You don't have to. Post your questions in here. That's all we got.